Hello guys, Colin here. Many of you have been asking for a while for me to do a bit of a rundown of the equipment that I'm using, so today I thought I'd start that process by showing you my current pedalboard setup, what I've got on there, and reasons it's set up that way. So if you want to follow me down to the floor, we'll take a look at this together. First off, I'm of the mindset that the fewer effects boxes you have, the better. If you can't get a sound you like out of just your guitar and amp, then no amount of pedals are ever going to fix that. You need to have your basic guitar tone from guitar and amp, and the pedals are only there to add a little bit of colour or a little bit of flavour. You don't want to be generating your whole sound through them. So with that little qualifier, you can see that my pedalboard is pretty minimal, and most of the time these things are switched off. The board itself is a Pedal Train Junior. It's solid metal construction, angled and sized enough to fit a decent amount of pedals. Also comes with a padded gig bag for carrying the thing about in. It's totally roadworthy, robust, and will stand up to a whole bunch of abuse. What more can you ask for? This is all being powered from a T-Rex Fuel Tank Junior, 5 isolated 9-volt outputs, and what a difference this makes over a cheap power supply. As soon as I switched to this, the improvement in sound quality was tenfold. Very much worth the investment. Get yourself a good quality power supply. First up is the Polytune 2 Blacklight by TC Electronic. I picked this up to replace my Boss TU2, and again, what a difference. Not only is tuning measurably faster on this thing, but the buffer on the Boss pedal really crushed the sound, and this one being true bypass, I don't have that problem. It's very clear and transparent. As soon as I switched to this from the Boss, I could hear a lot more clarity, details, and dynamics. The only one downside is that the contrast between the blue and the white LEDs on the screen isn't the best, but that's small complaints. I mean, tuning is fast and reliable and transparent, and that's pretty much everything you want from a tuner. Next in line is the Crybaby. This is the modified one, and you can check out my Pedal Mods playlist to see some of the stuff that I've done to this. The series of mods that I've done accumulating what I'm going to call the Deep Throat wah mod for fairly obvious reasons. It's dark, deep, and throaty wah, without the screeching top end that you'll often find in some other wahs when they get to the top of their sweep. It's also true bypass, so you don't get that obnoxious tone sucking that Crybabies are often infamous for, and there's a bright orange LED indicator to let you know that it's on. In fact, if you see any bright orange LEDs on any of these pedals on my pedalboard, it means that I've modified them. Next up is the Ibanez TS9. This is modified to sound more like the 808. This is my boosting box. It's got that classic smooth screamer sound. It's lovely and green, and it's exactly what I expect solos to sound like. Everyone needs one of these. From here, we take the cable directly to the front of the amp. These three pedals are the only thing that are between the guitar and the amp itself, and the majority of the time, these are off. Little side note about the amp at this point, it's pretty much always set on the crunch setting with a fairly high gain, and I use the guitar's pickups and volume and tones controls to tailor that sound, tailor the tone of what's coming from the amp. From the amp's effects loop, we come back to the board to the Ibanez FL9 flanger. I love this little beaten up orange box. I had to replace a few components to get this working and restore it back to its former glory, but it's absolutely fantastic. I use this to get some wetter sounds on my full clean and atmospheric sections, and occasionally add it on top of distortion to get some slow modulated effects. Everything's set pretty subtle on there because I don't want it to be too obvious and too in your face. From here we go to the Hoff Mini. Everyone needs a little bit of reverb, and this is probably the pedal it's on most often. From tone print, I can beam any sound that I want into here, but most of the time I've got it set on, I think it's a Dark Hall tone print from TC's standard library, although sometimes I'll change up to Cathedral and Spring reverbs, depending on what I'm doing. I certainly don't change reverb sounds often enough to merit having the big Hall of Fame, so this little one works exceptionally well for that. Also, it's red and looks gorgeous. Next is the wonderful MXR carbon copy delay, and what a pedal this is. I've got absolutely no complaints about it whatsoever. It's all analog Bucket Brigade stuff with great range from slapback to long echoes. Nice warm delay. If you twiddle the knobs, you can send the thing into infinite feedback loops and get some crazy sounds. The mod switch as well always stays on. That gives some sort of twisting, distorted modulations to the echoes that sort of hail back to the old vintage tape echo sort of stuff, that degrading tape the more the echo goes on. I don't need the tap tempo or precise note divisions of digital delays, and this one sounds great and is absolutely perfect for what I want to do. Although I'm still toying with the idea of picking up one of the bright carbon copies for a bit of a comparison. Lastly, I have the Ditto X4. This has taken the place of the Mini Ditto, which I had on here until pretty recently. I've got a full review of this pedal on my channel if you want to see all the features. but it's a fantastic thing. It's totally other level. There's 2 independent loopers that can interact in different ways, dedicated stop, a range of killer effects that can stack so you can get wild sounds, and you can even output the loops that you record here to a computer, so it's perfect for a practice rig like this one. If I were to go back to playing live, I'd probably rearrange things a little bit. Definitely take off the X4 because it's not really required if you're playing live, but I'd probably replace it with a noise gate because, yeah, you kind of need a noise gate playing live. But for now, this is a great little practice setup. Everything here is true bypass with the exception of the 2 Ibanez pedals. That leaves me 1 buffer in both the front end and the effects loop. They're both the same manufacturer, so the buffers should be of similar quality, and I'm very happy with the sound, the overall sound that the pedalboard provides. Now, the observant amongst you probably have been shouting since the start of this video, "But Colin, there's 7 pedals on this pedalboard, how can you possibly be powering them all from the 5 outputs on the Fuel Tank Junior?" Excellent question. Well, firstly, the Ditto X4 has its own independent power supply, so that's out of the equation, but that still leaves us 1 pedal over the limit. Well, one of the reasons I chose the big Polytune over one of the miniature versions is that the big one has a power output on it. Most tuners do. The manufacturers know that the tuners are off most of the time, so it doesn't make sense for them to be taking up a slot on your power supply. So they provide a power output that lets you link the power back out of the pedal when it's not in use. It's from this power output that I'm powering my final pedal. Well, 2 pedals actually, the Tube Screamer and the Cry Baby. I'm daisy chaining them off of that so that I've got 1 power output spare on the fuel tank should I want to chain out the Ditto for a noise gate. The last thing people often ask about is the patch cables, and I make these things myself to ensure their quality. They're all made out of the same type of cable, so I can ensure that the impedances are the same between all the patch cables, keeping things as consistent between all the pedals as possible. The flat pancake jacks mean that I can get the pedals as close together as I possibly can, and I can make them any length I need them to be. Don't scrimp on patch cables, get yourself good ones. It's very much worthwhile. As people will probably ask now, I do not trust all that solderless nonsense. That is a failed cable waiting to happen, in my opinion. Learn to solder, do it properly. It's the only way to ensure a solid electrically sound connection. There we are. Hopefully that's given you relevant insight into my setup and the gear that I'm using and why I'm using it that way. Feel free to ask any more questions in the comments section if you want more clarification on any specifics on this, and I'll see what I can do to answer them. Don't forget and subscribe, follow me on all the social media, and until next time, keep it loud, and I'll see you later.